The transfer portal, for all intents and purposes, is kind of done for the spring portion of 2023. So we finally have a pretty finished picture of what we just saw. The dust is kind of settled. You know, we got 2 new 5-stars, right? So the final rankings updates came out. Travis Hunter, still number 1 overall out of the portal. That's the corner. He went from Jackson State out to Colorado. You knew that. Okay, 2 new 5-stars. Denver Harris, transfer from A&M to LSU. He was part of that big signing class for A&M a year ago. He is now a 5-star. Great returns out of spring camp for LSU when it comes to Denver Harris. That was the only question. No one ever questioned anything other than him about, can he play the ball in the air? How is his cutting ability? Is he quick enough? None of that stuff. Denver Harris is a great athlete. It was off the field stuff with him. Well, you go through spring, you hear the right things from LSU. They bumped him up to a 5-star. Also, A.D. Mitchell, transfer from Georgia to Texas, part of a loaded wide receiver room. He is also a 5-star. And that's it. Only 3 5-stars in the transfer portal rankings this year. A.D. Mitchell with Steve Sarkisian is just selfishly something I look forward to watching this year. Okay, so with that in mind, when we look at the final team rankings, or at least the most up-to-date team rankings, these really aren't going to move around a bunch anymore. Colorado's still number 1. I was getting some intel from our staff at 24/7, and it's almost like they viewed Colorado detached from the rest of the transfer portal. Because if you really think about it, how are you supposed to measure one team that took 50 kids out of the portal against teams that took 14 or 15 or 10? Auburn took 21, and that's an extreme outlier already, and they're not even halfway to Colorado. So, Colorado, they took more kids out of the portal than LSU and USC and FSU combined. It's not a criticism. It's just that's a reality. So Colorado's almost been like in their own conversation, and then you judge them, and you're just amazed by what they did. And then you get to the rest of the teams, and it's like a separate conversation because they're in a more normal situation, whereas Colorado was in an unprecedented situation. LSU passed Auburn for number 2. That's the other big takeaway, at least when it comes to team rankings. Auburn and LSU have kind of been bouncing around 2 and 3. The Denver Harris updated ranking had a lot to do with that, but LSU really went after defensive back. They think they did really good at the running back position. I do too, for the record. But with Auburn got like a starting offense all the way down to the quarterback with Pate Thorne out of Michigan State. They got an entire starting offense. Jair Shorter, Shane Hooks, those are 2 receivers that probably instantly walk in there and are better than anyone on their roster. They got the kid from Ohio State. We'll see. He hasn't done anything. So we'll see about him. But Rivaldo Fairweather was the tight end they got that was kind of early in the cycle, so we forgot about him a little bit. Well, they didn't. He's a really good player. So Auburn still, I think, with more 4-star or higher talent than any team in the entire transfer portal rankings. Some other teams that I wanted to focus on, though, for a second, Michigan did a really good job here. And they're only ranked 25th, but that's all relative to how many kids you took. 6 out of the 8 kids they took are rated 4 stars. So Michigan was very selective. You see on the screen there, their average player rating way up there because of that selective nature of their process. Ernest Hausman, that linebacker they got out of Nebraska, just keep an eye on him. I thought Kentucky did a really, really good job in the portal. They took 18 kids, and their overall average player rating was 89. That's really, really good. For those unfamiliar with the scale and the metrics, that's really good. Offensive line, they had to hit big on the offensive line. They did. They also went and got Devin Leary, the quarterback there from NC State. They got they got Ray Davis, the running back from just down the road here at Vanderbilt. They got another running back out of NC State. So they did a really good job. It's going to be interesting because you lose Will Levis, and the assumption out there will be, Kentucky will fall back to earth. I'm not so sure that production's going to drop off a whole lot. They got Liam Cohen back at offensive coordinator, by the way. So I'm not quite sure if Devin Leary's upright, which he wasn't a majority of last year. He's given time to throw. He wasn't last year. Devin Leary's a really good player. And he's a redshirt senior. He's been around a long time. In 4 years at NC State, had over 6,800 passing yards and 62 touchdowns to 16 INTs. He is a good player. Probably a much better player than most folks believed that Kentucky was capable of getting out of the portal. So good on them. Also, Oklahoma. I cannot go this entire segment without mentioning the Sooners. They heavily addressed defensive line. Okay, out of the 7 4-star kids they got, 4 of them were on the defensive line. Deshaun McCullough also is a linebacker and was the highest overall rated player they went and got out of Indiana. We talked about him a lot like 2 months ago. He's been in the fold for a while with them. But Oklahoma's 9th in the transfer portal rankings, and you see, I mean, they had to overhaul defense, and they did as much as they could out of the portal. But then I got to go to the other side of the fence for just a second. What do I say about Clemson? We were talking about this earlier today in the office. What do you say about Clemson? They've got the number 98 class in the transfer portal, but that's because they chose to be 98th. They easily could have gone and gotten kids. They lost 10 kids to the portal. They went and got one, and that gets them the 98th ranked transfer portal class. That's, I think, by far the lowest out of all the Power 5. And it's like the great ACC experiment continuing over there, because since Mike Norvell got to Florida State, FSU has become Clemson's biggest competition for ACC supremacy, and that certainly will be on display this year. And yet you could not go about things any more opposite than those two have. Since Mike Norvell has come to Tallahassee, they have taken 46 kids out of the transfer portal. In the same period of time, Clemson has taken 2. And what does it result in? They got about the same odds to win the title this year. They play that game at Clemson. Clemson will be a very, very slight favorite, basically home field advantage. And odds makers are saying, have at it. We're watching the experiment right along with the rest of you. Just fascinating, always is, to watch different coaches go about it in different ways. This is not a surprise or anything like that. It's not like if I told Dabo Swinney, hey, you know you guys only took one guy out of the portal? He'd say, what? No, he knows that. That's their approach. They're very intentional about it. It's not the way I would do things, but I don't run Clemson. So we'll see. We will see. I think the big question is, if they lose 2 games or 3 games this year, would he change his approach? Does it take a negative outcome, in other words, for him to change that approach?